Hi, my name is Tim Sharp. I'm the owner of Sharp's Auto Sales and Service Center. Today we're going to talk about doing maintenance that you can perform at home. In most cars today, they will come with an owner's manual that will tell you when and what kind of fluids to put in your car. You can go to your local parts store. In most cases, they can help you buy like a oil change kit where you get the oil and filter at one price instead of buying separate because it will cost more. Most people can do the oil changes, their air filters, and their cabin air filter. Now, the cabin air filters in most cases are hidden behind the glove box. All you got to do is drop it, open a little door. It'll show you on it that it's a cabin air filter. If the car does not come with a cabin air filter, some cars can actually have one put in them, that they actually cut the door out, and you can put the cabin air filter in it. It'll have a little lock for it. And what you want to do then is every 15,000 change your cabin air, every 15 to 25 on your air filter, and your oil, I recommend 5,000 miles. Some people say 75 to 10,000, but there is no good excuse for not changing oil. Oil is the life of the car. If you bought a new or used car, you should have an owner's manual. And if you don't, you can always purchase one or get the information off the web or at your local parts store. Most important is start with changing your oil, looking at your belts, and when you go to the parts store, make sure and buy your oil and filter in a kit because it'll come cheaper. They offer them as an oil change kit. And at that time, every 15 to 25, I would recommend changing your air filter, change your oil at 5,000 mile intervals, and at that point, verify all your belts, your hoses, and look everything over. Just a good general inspection will do a lot for you. Now let's move inside the car. There's a cabin air filter that a lot of people that have allergies are unaware of. If you'll go in behind your glove box, most cars have them hidden right behind the glove box. They're just a simple door you pop and they slide right out. Now, replace that every 15,000 and you should never have a problem with your allergies. Actually, they make scented ones. Some people like them, some people don't. I recommend just get the standard filter. Do not get the scented one because some people have very allergic reactions to them. They can sneeze and all in your car. Now, let's move outside to your tires. Every time you change your oil, I would recommend every 5,000 and rotate your tires front to back and keep an eye on the alignment at that time to make sure that your tires are not wearing on the inside or outside. If the tires are wearing on the inside or outside, you definitely need to take it and get it aligned. Now, if your tires are wearing in the middle, you might want to check your air pressure because your air could be too low or too high. It depends on if they're wearing out quick or not wearing out at all in the outside edges. Because tires underinflated will wear just like a tire overinflated. They've got to stay properly maintained, and the proper inflation of the tire will be on your driver's door.
My name is Ken Nolan. I've been a mechanic for about 30 years, and I work here at Sharp Service Center. And we just wanted to talk about a few tire checks on a vehicle to help you out. Tire pressure is very important on a car. The wintertime and the summertime, your air pressure will go up and down. You'll add air in the summer and you'll lose it in the winter. But on your vehicle, inside your door, it tells you the air pressure, what it's supposed to be on your front and rear tires. And as far as rotating your tires, really a visual inspection is the best way. You know, if your tires wearing out more on the front than they are the back, then you need to put your best tires on the front because that's the ones that does all the turning. But if you take it to a mechanic somewhere to get your oil changed, they're supposed to look at them and let you know these things. But like this tire here, if you see your tires wearing out on one side or the other like this, it's letting you know that your tires or your front end needs alignment. And if you start seeing a lot of bumps on your tires, that could be a bad shock or a bad strut. As far as replacing your tires, that's just something that, again, a visual inspection or get you a tire gauge like this one here that you can stick down in your tire and it gives you the depth in 30 seconds. Your tire gets down to 5 or 6 30-second, it's about time to replace them. Normally a new tire is anywhere from 14 to 16 30 seconds. So like I said though, if you visual inspection, you can tell if you need tires or not. Miles don't matter on the tire. Some of them will wear a lot better than others do. Okay, on this tire gauge that you could get at any auto parts. I'm gonna kind of show you how to use it. This is a new tire here. If you just stick that down in there and push on it, you can read it in 30 seconds here. See, this tire here is it's a 20-second. Compared to this old one, it's down to a 5. It's the reason we changed it. Because DOT regulations is you can run them down to a 4 on the front and 2 on the rear, but you're taking chances in the rain at that. If you don't keep a pretty good check on your air pressure, if you got one tire that goes down, it's gonna wear that tire out more than it does on the other side, and it's gonna affect your gas mileage, and your car start pulling left or right if the tire does go down. So it's something else to keep in mind. If you have a tire going down, you just take it to a mechanic or a tire shop, and they can take it off and see why it's going flat, and put a patch in it or a plug or whatever it needs. They average anywhere from 20 to 30 bucks to repair a tire. You really don't want to put a plug in your front tire. I mean, if your tire goes to going down, it's better to take them off and put a patch on the inside, because if you plug your tire, especially your front tires, and they're always turning, left or right or going up and down mountains, the plug could work itself out and you could blow your tire. But your rear tire, you could plug it because it's stationary, it just stays in one spot all the time. It don't turn. We're going to show you a difference between plugging and patching a tire here. If you go in somewhere and you have a nail or screw or something in your tire, they'll pull it out. And this plug here, they'll bend that over and they'll stick that in the hole. It kind of twists in the knot on the inside of it. I mean, it works, gets you by, it'll get you so you can get another tire. But you really don't want to do something like that if you have something close to the edge of your tire, especially on your front. But if you take it somewhere, they can take it off and put a patch on the inside. It's 10 times better. It'll outlast a tire probably. I would recommend patching over plugging every time, because like I said, this is prone to come out, especially on the front tire to where they're turning all the time. Where this patch is, it'll be there forever.
When you're doing maintenance such as an oil change and an air filter on your car, you might want to glance over and check your brake fluid. If your brake fluid is down to a minimum, do not add to it. That's an indication your brakes are wearing. You need to have your brakes checked or replaced. Or if there's a leak, that tells you there's a leak. Whatever you do, do not add to the fluid, because all you're doing at that point is giving yourself a false pedal, and your brake pads are worn. And now you're into a situation where you may get out and have no brakes if they're worn and go through the rotors. Things that go wrong with your car normally is something as simple as your battery, which is right over here. You need to check your battery once a year minimum and keep it maintained by not letting it have any corrosion on it. It should look good and clean. Now, on most cars, unless it's a hybrid, this is an alternator that can be changed by most people. It is a 12-volt system, and it works by charging the battery. That is a main link to the car. This is your drive belt. Cars do and don't have power steering pumps anymore. Some cars have electronic steering, which they will not have a pump. This is the drive belt right there. And if you notice, you can read the numbers on it. That's a good indication that belt's been rechanged within at least the last year. Okay, other things you want to pay attention to is like your water pump, your pulleys, your fan clutch. Here's your water pump. And in the older model cars and some of the newer cars, they've gone away from having fan clutches. And what that means, instead of having a fan turning when the motor's turning, they've gone to electric fans, which is right here on the front of them. They're located on the back of the fan, and they run, once the temperature of the car gets to operating, they will turn on and they'll run approximately from 220 to up to 250. If the car overheats, if they're dual fans, they'll both come on, try to cool the car. Now, at that point, if the car does overheat on you, you need to pull over to a safe location Shut her down. Do not take the cap from the radiator or the coolant recovery jug loose. Give it time to cool down. If you're not sure what to do, call a professional. Now, here on a car, a lot of people make a mistake. These are coils and plug wires, and cars have plugs. That's the difference. This is a gasoline motor. Now, a gasoline motor will have the coils, the plugs, injectors, and naturally y'all get air. A diesel will have glow plugs to light it off when it's cold. It'll have injectors, which now they use high pressure oil to fire them, and they're done by electronics. Back in the day, they was just manual, and they would just pop off by pressure, and now they've gone to high pressure because of emissions to keep the diesel cleaner, and they've gone to low sulfur fuel. So if you've got an older model diesel, you got to distinguish it's below 97. You do not want to put the late model sulfur fuel in it if you don't have to. This is the fuse box, which is now considered a module, which it communicates with all the body functions and all the computers, PCM, ECM, TCM, ABS module, and SIR module, which is the airbag module. These are known for having solid state circuit boards in them, and they will go bad, but everything on the car appears to be working, but it will not start. In some cases it will turn over, some cases it will not. At that point, you gotta have to check it. Once you find out part of it's dead, then you'll know to replace the boxes. These boxes run between 150 and 400 on average. You can actually just snap these locks up. The box will come up and you can actually unplug, go get another fuse box and put in. If it did not lose its memory on the modules, you could just plug and go. And in some cases, like if you get ones with electronic running boards, a lot of communication issues, they will not work until you reprogram the whole car. On this particular vehicle, it's a Chevrolet. Here's your oil stick. You pull your oil stick up. First of all, a good way to check it is hold it up and look at both sides. Take the lowest reading will be your proper reading. And at that time, you may or may not have to add oil. It is good to check them every 1,000 miles or less, because today a lot of oil will burn in a converter and you'll never see it because it's synthetic. Now here is what's on your valve cover. You fill up with oil, you just open it up, you can pour your oil in and fill it up. These particular engines hold 6 quarts of oil. You can check, your owner's manual will tell you the proper amount, or you can check with a local parts store or a mechanic. This right here is your transmission dipstick. If you notice how it has a pop lid, that's to keep it from blowing out if it gets hot. Now you pull this out, you check it the same way you check this. At this point, once you check it and you put it back in there, you want to completely submerge it. You want to have the car running. In some cases, you need it in park to check it properly. In some, you have to have it in neutral. If you'll read the stick itself, it'll actually show you and tell you what to check it with. It's right here to tell you what type of fluid to put in it in most cases, not all, but most. Okay, after looking at your brake fluid, if it's low and your brake pads appear to be good, then you definitely want to pull the wheel and inspect them. You do not want to try doing this if you do not have proper mechanic skills or a mechanic in the family. If you're not familiar with brakes, I recommend not touching them because brakes are dangerous. If you're not properly trained or know what you're doing, you might clean the surface. Something as simple as brake clean don't sound like nothing, but if you use carburetor cleaner and clean your rotors with carburetor cleaner, you cannot stop the car because it's got an oil base to it. Now, most cars today do not have transmission sticks anymore. You have to take them to a shop, have them put on a rack, and have a plug pull to check them. So if you see a leak and you've got a late model car and you can't find a dipstick on it, you'll definitely have to take it to a shop or have it lifted where you can do a proper check. Now, generally that means putting the car up in the air, putting the car, most cases, in neutral at operational temperature, and pull the plug, and if it runs out, it's good. If it don't run out, you need to add to it. Now, there's 2 plugs. There's a high plug and a low plug, so you definitely want to pull the high plug. The low plug will drain the car. After looking at your car and deciding you need an oil change, the oil is the most important part of your engine other than coolant. Now, oil, if you let your engine, say your engine's using low oil, every 1,000 miles uses a quart. You let her get 2 quarts low, that produces more heat, more wear and tear. The oil and changing it, maintaining the proper level is the life of the engine. When under your hood and you're doing your oil changes, after you check all your fluids, look at your coolant, make sure it's at a proper level. If it's low just a little bit, you add like maybe a quart. that's not generally a serious issue. That's just evaporation over a period of time. Now, if it's real low, you're going to definitely want to do a pressure check and verify what's leaking. Don't just fill it up and assume that it's going to fix itself, because it will not fix itself. Coolant is as important as oil, because if the engine runs hot, the oil will deteriorate, the motor will lock up or blow a head gasket, and then the motor is trashed. There's different types of coolant. Every car seems to have a different coolant. You got some for BMWs, you got some for Range Rovers, you got some for Nissans, you got some for Toyota. They do make a coolant that's called a universal coolant. If you go to a parts store, when you buy the coolant, make sure it meets or exceeds the specifications for your vehicle. If you can't find them in your owner's manual, you can look them up online, or the parts store can tell you if that's proper coolant. But as a rule of thumb, you always need to keep antifreeze in your car to keep it cooler in the summer, and it maintains it from freezing in the winter. And if you keep a proper 50-50 mixture, that's fine. But when you go to a parts store, purchase full strength antifreeze, because it's just like $1 difference. And if you're going to put it in, you can add your own water, because 50-50 is half water. If you put pure water in your car, it'll cause the car to have rust build up and all. You can put pure water in if you're having an issue to get home, but it's not recommended. Pure water will cause the car to freeze in the winter, and under extreme heat, it will overheat. It'll boil quicker. Antifreeze keeps the boiling point down and keeps it from freezing. Most important thing in a car is changing oil. Now, whether you can afford it or not, an oil change is a necessary evil. If you can afford to drive the car, you can afford to change oil. Now, like for instance, every 5,000 miles, change your oil, check your fluids and everything, but the oil is the life of the car. It's just like the blood in your veins. People who fail to check their oil or change their oil generally have premature engine failure. Now, let's just say that you're going down the road and your car's got 5,000 miles and you know it need an oil change. You don't have the money this week. Well, make sure that you change it. I mean, a few hundred miles over, it's not going to hurt you. A few hundred miles less, it's not going to hurt you. But failing to change oil, it will turn into a gel, and it will damage the motor because it will quit going through. It'll become a SERP, and you cannot run SERP through the engine, and the motor will have premature failure in the bearings. And then you'll lose your engine, and you'll have to replace the whole engine. There's no fixing it except for remanufacture. The best way to prolong the life of a vehicle is maintaining it by changing your oil on proper schedules and maintaining the schedules and keeping it a rigid schedule.
All right, we're going to show you how to do a basic oil change, which can save you money. Because most of your oil change places these days, like your fast lubes, well, you're looking at $40-50 for a conventional oil change, and your synthetics could be over $100. But I know you don't always have access to a lift like this, but if you have a jack and jack your car up, you want to get under it and find your oil pan, and there will be a plug in the side of it. So you just want to loosen it, and do be careful, because if your car is run, this will be hot, and it will burn it. We have a catch basin here which if you do it yourself, you have just a little pan to catch it in, because you don't want it to go into the ground, or you want to get rid of it properly. Just when you take this plug out, just do it kind of quick, because if that oil is hot, it will get you. While you're under your vehicle, if you'll just kind of glance around and maybe look at your tires, and if you see any leaks, oil, grease, oil, something you would want to address. But and while that's going, you can loosen your oil filter. And all those are in different locations also. Again, this will burn you if it's hot. So if you'll just kind of unscrew it, and oil will start dripping out of it. When you do take your oil filter off, you want to make sure this rubber O-ring comes off with it. Because if that stays up on your motor and you screw another one on there, it will leak and could burn your motor up. Just when you pour it out, just make sure you don't see a lot of shavings or a discoloration in the oil. It all ought to be about the same color as it came out of the pan. And when you put your new filter on, you just kind of rub a little oil on your O-ring. It will seal a lot better. And when you're screwing your filter on, you really just want to get it tight and turn it about a quarter turn. Because if you put it on with a oil wrench and tighten it up real tight and it gets hot, it will really tighten up and it'd be hard to get off. So you want to make sure it's tight, but not super tight. The oil that goes through your filter, there's cartridges in it, and it filters all any shavings, old oil or anything that's built up, carbon. I mean, it's better off to change your filter than it is your oil, really. Kind of look at the threads on your plug, make sure they're not stripped. And most of them have an O-ring in here or a washer. Because you don't want to screw it back in, it leak, and all your oil run out and burn your engine up. If you start it with your finger to make sure you get your thread started good, and the rest of the way with your wrench. You just want it to tighten up, and then snug it a good quarter turn or so. On a rear-wheel drive car now, your oil pan will always be in front of your transmission. But if you have like a front-wheel vehicle, if you'll see which side your belts and everything's on, that's the same side your oil pan's gonna be on. Okay, you have your motor and your oil pan up front here. Then your transmission and your transmission pan is hooked to it. And while you're doing this, it's also a good time to check your coolant level, your power steering. Just kind of glance over your hoses and belts. Like when you're looking at your belts, if you see a lot of cracks coming across it, if you can count like maybe 10 cracks within an inch, it's usually time to change your belt. It will go to squilling. And like on your hoses, if you'll just kind of look and kind of feel around, see if you feel any soft spots or see any bigger places than the hose is, it's coming apart and swelling up, but these look good. Once you get your oil full, this is your transmission stick. It's usually behind your oil stick. Usually a red cap, or it'll say transmission fluid on it. But most vehicles, let me wipe this off. It has a hot and a cold reading on it. The cold reading there at the bottom and the hot there at the top. Now to check your hot, the vehicle has to be run and up to operating temperature before you can check the hot reading. Since this vehicle is hot, we will crank it and check it. And we are good. But after you change your oil, let it run a few minutes because it does have to change, fill the filter up, cut it back off, let it settle down and check it again.
The difference between gas and diesel. A diesel runs on compression. It has no way to spark the fuel other than the pressure of the cylinder. That's why they've gone to using high pressure oil, because they've lowered the compression, and to atomize the fuel, it'll bust quicker and it'll actually burn easier than it used to. Now, gas, on the other hand, has to have a spark plug, and when it goes into the cylinder, the plug fires the fuel. Now, the difference is, like when you're going down the road and you pull into a station and you put diesel in your gas and you start to drive off and you realize it, or you have driven off, at that point in time you need to shut it down. The whole system needs to be drained and cleaned, and there's a good possibility all you'll have to do is replace the fuel and the filter and clean the tank. It generally will not hurt a fuel pump in a gasoline. It may or may not hurt the injectors, depends on how far you drove it. Now, you can tell when you're driving a truck it's got diesel and gas mixture, it will not run properly. It'll smoke, it'll clatter, it'll sound like it's just coming apart. It has no power. Now on a diesel, it does just the opposite. If you put gasoline in a diesel, it'll actually start running better, and it'll actually create heat, and the motor will actually get hot enough it'll melt down. And it's capable, if you put enough gas to it, it can actually blow the motor apart. It's not likely, but it can. The motor will run away because it gets so hot, it'll start running on its own. Now, the gas in a diesel is more dangerous than diesel in a gas. So if you're driving a diesel and you put gas in it, the second you realize it, you need to stop, shut it off, and have everything clean. And in some cases, the ejectors, your fuel filters, your lines, and your tank, and possibly an electric pump may have to be replaced. The injectors, reason they will have to be in place, if you run them far enough, they'll actually start melting from the fuel burning so hot. It's just like a torch on the end of the injector. Where a gas is sprayed out and the fuel goes through it, it's a colder burn than it would be normally. That's why the engine will not run proper, because it's a lower grade fuel than gasoline. Diesel's considered a lower grade than gas, and it does not catch fire like gas, but it will burn. And also, another thing you need to understand is brake fluid is very flammable. It will catch fire and burn. Do not let brake fluid get on exhaust manifolds or anything of that nature if you're under your hood servicing your cars. Today on most new cars, you cannot use battery cables like you used to on older cars because of all the electronics. You must use a jumper box, which has a negative and has a positive. And you can turn it on and you can see the quality if the battery's got any juice in it. Now at this point, you turn it on, you step in the car, you crank it up. You let the car run for a second, let the alternator go into the charging mode, and then remove this. Now if the car dies, most likely the alternator's not charging. But it is very important, do not take battery cables and jump cars off with them today, because if you make an arc, you can damage both computers in both cars. A jump box is very important to have. On purchasing a jump box, you can purchase them from Costco, Sam's, the parts store, online, but maintain by a brand name that has a warranty, because most jump boxes only have a 90 to maybe 6 month warranty. You want one at least has a year warranty. Follow the instructions on charging it for the first time, and also on maintaining it, keeping it charged at all times, so when you need it, it's ready for you. A jump box generally runs between, say, $70 to $300, depends on what you like to buy. In most cases, most people can buy a $50 to $70 one, buy one on sale, and put it in their car or put it at their house. But make sure, if you keep it in the car every so often, you have to take it in the house and keep it charged up, or at times it will lose its charge. There's a proper way to maintain it and follow instructions. If you have no other choice but to use battery cables, pull your car up, turn all your lights off, make sure your automatic lights, your daytime running lights, everything's off. Turn all your accessories off, your radios, everything. Hook the cables to both cars, then crank the car. Now that's the car that you're using to jump the other one with. Let it run 15 to 20 minutes to build some power in the battery. And at that point, let the person crank it. Let it sit there and idle for a few minutes, make sure it's going into the charge mode. At that point, cut your car off, cut their car off. Disconnect the cables and see if it'll start on its own. Never disconnect the cables where they will arc with the cars running. To properly jump a car off, first of all, it's better to put the positive on first in case something happens and you slip and hit something. The negative, if you cannot get to the battery ground, you can actually ground it to the body or to a frame member or a alternator, anything that's solid grounded to the car that the battery will be hooked to, which the motor has a ground and the frame has a ground. Once you hook this up, all you do is you turn your jump box to on. Or when you turn them on, then you can get in there and jump. Now if you try to use battery cables, in most cases, the newer cars, if you hook one to the other, you can damage your modules. You can damage your computer. You can absolutely burn a car down. They're not designed, that's why they've got jump boxes. The 11 to 12 and more computers are on them. Let's say, even with a jump box, you can reverse polarity and the jump box will take the hit generally and it will not damage. Where if you got a positive hooked to a negative on another car by accident, you can ground both cars. At that point, the batteries can explode and the cars both burn and get serious injury, if not death. Now, the reason they do not use jumper cables on late model cars is you've got to have amperage plus power. Most cars, when they're dead, the battery is charging and it doesn't have enough amperage because it'll turn over slow and actually grind. And that can be harmful to the computer. So a jump box, generally most of them starts with 450 or more cranking amps. And with that there, that will not harm it because most starters will draw 140 plus amps. Late models is from like 96 up, okay? After 2000, they got more advanced. After 2006 and 7, they got more. 12, 16, now we're at 20. The car today really should have a larger battery than 12 volts because it's underpowered. They've compensated by putting alternators on them that's a lot bigger. Back, what I'd call the old days, back in the 60s and 70s, average alternator was 30 to 40 amps. Now they're 100 plus amps. There's even some 160, 200 amps. And certain vehicles have to have 2 alternators to maintain the electrical power that they put out. The most forgot about item on a car is your windshield wipers. Your wipers are the most important part of your car when it's raining. Nobody remembers until we need wipers. Wipers should be checked and replaced approximately once a year, looked at every 6 months. In most cases, people do not change them until a bad rainstorm and they realize they got a problem. If you was to purchase a new car or a used car or just maintaining your regular car, first thing you need to do is start checking every month and sometimes once a year. It just depends on the type of car you got. Check on your recalls, your bulletins, and any other special policies that they're doing. Like Toyota, they have a policy where they're fixing a bunch of the airbags, and they're also fixing a bunch of the ABS brakes that people was told it was not repairable. And there's thousands of dollars, and in case the price exceeds the cost of the car, they will buy the cars from you in most cases, if you're reasonable.